What's going on, everybody? Thanks for pulling this video up instead of doing it in class. I guess we will do our lecture right through here. This new camera thing, this is not something that was on here before, so it's kind of cool that they incorporated it. I guess that's one of the nice things about having this um, upgraded Office 360 version that Kaiser University offers. So all of you guys should be able to actually have this kind of technology on your own computers, downloading it and using it there. So check out what we're going to do here today for this cardiorespiratory fitness training chapter. And you guys can do this kind of stuff yourselves if ever you have any assignments that we give you that line up with it. All right, let's go through things. I don't want to waste a lot of time. And I think I have to, let's see. Well, the video is going to keep recording as I go, so that's good. Okay, cool. So what we're talking is about cardio. And I know some of you guys have been asking about how does this fit in? It doesn't really look like this has a big thing to do in most of the fitness programs that we looked at in our book, which I do have right here next to me. So trying to figure out how to use this camera, having it look at me. Anyway, so we'll talk a little bit about all that and more. So after this presentation, you should be able to define and describe the different components associated with cardiorespiratory training, how the various physiological systems respond and adapt, which we have already talked about and you guys spent a lot of time on last month. Look at the different benefits associated with it, and then look at the current guidelines, recommendations, and then provide instructions to clients. So cardiorespiratory fitness reflects the ability of the circulatory and respiratory systems to supply oxygen-rich blood to skeletal muscles during sustained physical activity. We went over that when you guys did the little self-teaching activity in the class to everyone else. So cardiorespiratory fitness is really, really important for health and wellness, especially when it comes to us being able to engage in normal activities of daily living. That's your wind. That's how you keep with it. And a lot of people don't train this way, and they should. I mean, we kind of joke about it sometimes, right? When we talk about walking up to the third floor and being out of breath. I usually will go outside and take phone calls here. And as I'm walking around trying to talk, oh my gosh, I just get so winded because I have not been training my cardiorespiratory fitness like I used to. And I used to train it a lot. I really like cardio as an exercise choice. It's one of the ones that I will typically go to. But we'll talk about other ways of doing cardio. If you're not someone that's into running or swimming or biking, there's other stuff that you can do as well. The scientific rationale of integrated cardiorespiratory training. So what does that mean? This is, remember, NASM is all about practicality. How do we integrate this with the rest of what we do? So integrated cardiorespiratory training is a way of planning training programs that systematically progress clients through various stages to achieve optimal levels of physiologic, physical, and performance adaptations by putting the right kind of stress on the cardiorespiratory system. Remember when we talked about those tables that you guys are going to be using this very Monday? The ones that when we do the actual YMCA, the step test, it's not the YMCA test this time, it's just the step test, but based on what heart rate you find with your client, that will put them in one of these zones, and then that gives you some guidance in this chapter. We'll talk about it, how to actually progress them and how to work with them in there. A lot of benefits. A lack of cardiorespiratory fitness is associated with death, with mortality. So not being fit from a cardio standpoint is, I mean, you can develop different heart diseases, CAD, CHD. I know we don't think about it here, but a lot of you guys lived up north at some point. But this is one of those things where people don't train for cardio, and then the kind of winter that they've had up north this very year, when the snow comes down, you got to shovel your driveway and your walkway and all that stuff. There are people that drop dead doing that because it takes so much energy. I mean, it takes some muscular endurance and all that, but from a cardio standpoint, just bending over, that repetitive motion of shoveling and lifting and shoveling and lifting. I mean, I remember having to do it at my house. It's not fun. It really does take a lot of energy, and it is very taxing on your cardiorespiratory system. So you could see how a situation like that, where there's even legal ramifications, which I don't know if you guys know that, but you do have a legal responsibility to shovel your sidewalks or your driveways. At least you did where I was from in New Jersey. I know one of the things was if you shoveled any of it, you need to shovel all of it because that's a liability issue. So sometimes people, if they wanted to get out of it, they just wouldn't shovel it all and they would just leave it completely covered. But it's a slipping hazard. If people walk by and they get hurt on your property, they can sue you. So that is causing you, that becomes necessary for you to engage in this cardiorespiratory fitness. And if you're not training all year for snow season, which who is, that could be a recipe for disaster, particularly for someone that has been sedentary for too long and they might have some other issues that go along with it. So when we say cardiorespiratory fitness is associated with mortality, I'm sure there are endless other examples, but I always feel like that's a pretty good one to kind of talk about. Each session that you do, just like what we do with our strength training sessions, can have some phases of it. You've got your warm-up phase, your conditioning phase, and your cool-down phase. They are all equally important. Most people always focus on conditioning. They don't really do the warm-up or the cool-down the way they're supposed to. The same can be said in the other forms of fitness training we talk about, but you as a professional need to know how important they are and that we've got to just keep doing them. So the warm-up, we know that that prepares the body for physical activity. Movements that don't necessarily have to be movement specific. It's just about getting the muscle tissue warm, getting your heart rate up a little bit. And then you've got more specific warm-ups where you are doing some movements that closely mimic those of the actual activity. Why do it? Well, tissue temperature, so there's better extensibility, what we talked about with the flexibility chapter. Again, if those muscles are cold and tight and things aren't moving the way they're supposed to, that normal extensibility, you could run into issues with potential injury. You could tear muscles, but if they're nice and warm and ready, then they can stretch easily and go back to normal more easily. Also helps your clients or you, if you're doing the training, to psychologically get yourself ready for the upcoming. So there's a lot of good benefits. And then here's a little chart that goes a little bit more into depth on this. So the practical application, we'll go back. Then it's not letting me go back. Good deal. The warm up for a stabilization level. So check out what we have here. Self-myofascial release, static stretching, and then cardiorespiratory exercise. So you start always with the SMR, which you've kind of learned so far. We did it in the other chapter, which since you should be watching this for Monday, you should actually be working on this lab here today where you're doing all of these different SMR and stretches that they have in the book, the flexibility exercises. So you work those, again, like the hold for 30 seconds on the SMR, hold for 30 seconds on the static stretching, and then your choice of cardio. So this is a good warm-up in the stabilization level client. So somebody that's in phase 1, right? You put them on, you go through those things first, and then you give them 5 to 10 minutes, right, on the treadmill, the stationary bike, stair climber, rower, elliptical trainer, all things that are easily accessible, something that you can do. I mean, if you had access to an indoor track, or if you were outside doing this, you could have them, walk a track for 5 to 10 minutes. It depends, if they've got knee issues or if there's anything about impact on their joints, arthritis. Then you might want to switch to something like a stationary bike or a rower or an elliptical, things that don't have any impact on the joints. But it's really up to you and your client to figure out what they prefer, what's easy and convenient to just do for 5 to 10 minutes. And that's how you incorporate that type of cardiorespiratory exercise into your training program at the stabilization level. Strength level, same thing. We'll just look at some different intensities, which we will get into. We'll break that down. And then here you go at the power level. You notice that we don't really see much when it comes to how we're going to be doing this. So there's not a lot of specific cardio that we're going to be doing. Company jumping in here. I don't know if we've got meetings scheduled for this room. I just figured from an acoustic standpoint that this would be a good place to record. The conditioning phase. So we talked warm up. Let's talk about for actual conditioning. We know it's engaged in for a variety of purposes. It improves a lot of your aspects of health, including a stronger, better heart, working better, not smarter, not harder. The stroke volume versus your heart rate. one stroke volume, if you're putting all that blood and oxygen out to all those tissues in greater capacity in one stroke, that's obviously better. And the conditioning phase can help improve that. So yeah, pumping blood for that cardiac output. Reduced risk of heart disease is something that comes along with it. Lower resting heart rate and lower heart rate at any given level of exercise. So if you work on this, your heart rate is going to stay down. It's going to be more efficient no matter how hard you're working, and then you've got a greater capacity to do more and more work. The cool down phase, again, one of the most often neglected phases of any training program. But it gives the body a nice ability to come back down, a nice transition from exercise back to a steady state of rest. Possibly could help to improve flexibility, which is always good. Removal of waste byproducts via the blood. Minimize muscle soreness. And then allow your cardiorespiratory system to respond to lower demand. So it's not shocked into action. It doesn't go from full tilt to absolutely nothing. And likewise, you wouldn't go from absolutely nothing to full tilt. This can also help with issues of blood pooling in some of your limbs as a result of this kind of exercise. So that'll help to avoid dizziness, fainting. And man, as someone that used to do a lot of running and lots of cardio, it really does, like that cool down phase. I never stop cold, or if you do, you just don't feel right. You need to at least walk around a little when you're done. It does help to give you a little bit more of an emotional balance and let it all sink in, because once the tiredness and the exhaustion and just your body hurting and your breathing is heavy, once that starts to wear away, you get this very natural runner's high, they call it if you're a runner, but it's a very euphoric sensation. You feel really good, really accomplished, and the cool down really helps you relish those few minutes before you have to get back to the real world and jump back into all the things that you're doing. So for someone that is doing it for an extended period of time, so they're doing like a long run or they're doing lots of cardio, you want to decrease the intensity of the exercise and work at this lowered intensity for 5 to 10 minutes. So a good 5 to 10 minute cool down for someone doing a lot of cardio. Flexibility also should be a component here. Again, we're getting those muscles back to resting original lengths, and so you're looking again at more self-myofascial release and some more static stretching. And static stretching especially being an important component here post-workout. As for the workout itself, most people that are doing this kind of exercise, doing cardiorespiratory exercise, it's all about improvements in their health and fitness. Cardiorespiratory activities or exercise have a profound effect on the overall physical and mental of a participant, such as they can help to, believe it or not, decrease daily fatigue. So if you're kind of walking around tired, being more active can actually help you with that. Helps with alleviating anxiety, depression, CAD, which we've already mentioned, hypertension, so high blood pressure, this can help with that. If you've got non-insulin dependent diabetes, cancer, osteoporosis, obesity. Osteoporosis because a lot of this cardio, especially if you do things that are weight bearing, I mean, that's loading the bones, making them stronger. Obesity, you're burning calories. So it can help to slough off some of that nastiness that you don't want when it comes to obesity. But yeah, I mean, going back to some of the psychological benefits, anxiety, depression, I can tell you, because I mean, I share with you guys, I don't get to exercise as often as I want to these days. Like really, it bothers me and it bums me out. And at times when I'm just kind of down, and I have them, I have those days, much like anybody, any human being. But I remember when I used to be able to work out, I mean, there was nothing better sometimes. You're having just a down day or a down week, or you're anxious about something and you don't really know how to deal with it. Just pounding the pavement or getting on a bike or just something. Back when I used to swim, that was always good too. I mean, the benefits really do outweigh the risks in my mind, but I don't have a lot of special considerations I need to be worrisome of. I mean, even if you do, as you guys are learning, there are modifications that you can do for anything. So here are some general activity recommendations. I mean, and these come from like the ACSM recommendations. If you look to see this here, they're talking about 40 to 60% of VO2, but we're not looking at VO2 usually. We usually don't have the ability to even measure that because it requires more expensive equipment. So one of the things that we have showed you guys is just doing that 55 to 70% of heart rate max. There's even stuff in this presentation that talks about heart rate reserve, which that's the method that I really do push more than these other ones, because if you can measure heart rate, right, you might not have a heart rate monitor, so you might then have to go to something else entirely. But if you have a heart rate monitor, if you're trying to individualize the workout for someone, going with that heart rate reserve method, right, where you find not only their max heart rate, 220 minus their age, but then you also factor in their resting heart rate, take a percentage of that difference, right, because that difference is the heart rate reserve, and then whatever percentage, so you put 55% times that heart rate reserve, add that number back to their resting heart rate, and now you've got a better target heart rate range. You 55 to 70%, and now they're working appropriate for them. So someone with better cardiorespiratory fitness, they're going to have, you know, a different set of beats per minute when it comes to their target heart rate than someone else the same age who has poor cardiorespiratory fitness. That's why that heart rate max, it's okay, but everyone that's the same age is always going to get the same recommendation. And that is just very, very limited, because anyone at any given age is not created the same. And especially when it comes to their cardio capabilities, forget it. You shouldn't be training them that way. So heart rate reserve, which we've talked about, the Carbonin method, that's again that 220 minus your age and then finding that against your resting heart rate. That's the way to do this. But 5 days per week, moderate intensity here is going to be considered 55 to 70, either of heart rate max or heart rate reserve. And then when they say type, that's that, you know, brisk walking, or, you know, it could be a jog for someone. And enjoyment factor, that's important too, because if you don't like it, you won't do it. So make sure that whatever you pick, if somebody's like, oh, I hate running, well, don't put them on a treadmill. Even if you think it's good for them, find another way to do this. But try to keep them in that heart rate range that we're looking for. Vigorous, do that 3 times a week, or some combination of the both. But vigorous intensity, you're going to be looking at anything greater than 70% of their heart rate max or their heart rate reserve. And again, pick on things that require minimal skill to perform if they're beginners, and then you can upgrade and progress from there. Combination of both, 3 to 5 days per week, as long as you hit those minimums, that's going to be the best thing for you, and it's going to show tremendous improvements in the cardiorespiratory fitness capabilities. So guidelines. So we'll talk about the FIT principle. They add an E here with NASM, which I haven't seen a whole lot of before, but it's still under the same premise. Any form of training has to have certain guidelines in order for you to develop that proper program. So that's frequency, intensity, time, and type. And then the E stands for enjoyment. And I really do like that they're putting that in here, because we're not robots. And your clients aren't robots. And sometimes you got to really talk to them and get to know them. This is why rapport is so important, because you got to figure out what they actually enjoy. And if they don't enjoy something, you need to make sure they're comfortable telling you, like, hey, I didn't like that so much. Is there something else we can do? If they're just a yes man or a yes woman and they're like, oh, no, it was fine, and they kind of hate it, they'll probably wait till their sessions run out and then not come and see you anymore. And that's what you don't want. So really encouraging this open communication style where you can really kind of give them feedback and make sure that they can give you feedback. That's going to be in everybody's best interest. But frequency, intensity, time. So what does that look like in cardio as compared to strength training? Well, frequency is the number of training sessions or activity sessions for a given time frame. We went over that in the OPT model. We talked about periodization. So how many sessions? Intensity. This is what I was talking about just a few minutes ago when we were talking about either like the VO2 reserve, heart rate max, heart rate reserve. But it's the general definition for intensity is the level of demand that the activity will place on. Time, how much time? So in a lot of your workout programs that they talked about, 5 to 10 minutes is really the only cardio you're going to have as part of that program. But knowing that they have to do 150 or 75 minutes a week, you as a trainer can assign homework. And if they're looking for you to help maximize their benefits, their adaptations for whatever their goals are, whether it's strength training or fat loss or lean mass build, I don't care how many sessions they buy with you a week, it really should not start and stop with you. If the only time that they're working with you, working at all during the week is with you, that's not the best way to maximize their benefits. They're going to need to do more. So at least getting them out there, telling them to do some bouts of cardio, give them a target heart rate range to work in, and have them do that so they at least hit their 150 minutes a week of moderate, 75 minutes a week of vigorous, or some combination of the two. Type is the modality, and that can be anything that's considered cardio, and then enjoyment, just picking what they like. If somebody hates running, don't give them running. So these are those methods of prescribing intensity. I mentioned them before. You can do peak VO2, VO2 reserve. You can look at the METs, like the metabolic equivalent, max heart rate method, which is easy to calculate and gives you something to work with, but maybe not the most accurate. Heart rate reserve, that's one that I said I like, so keep working on that, get good at it. I know most of you have done this with me. But if you're a newer student and you need a little work on this, we can practice that together. RPEs, or ratings of perceived exertion, that's that scale from 6 to 20. It says, okay, on a scale of 6 to 20, how hard is this activity? So it's more of a subjective intensity, but you don't need a heart rate monitor. You don't need any kind of fancy equipment. You just need people to pay attention to their bodies. And so, like, I don't like our traditional Borg scale. Borg is the person that created it. It's like from 6 to 20, and I think it's coming up here in a minute, and we'll see what like a 6 means versus what a 20 means. I think that's really confusing, and I've been teaching this a long time, and I still think it's confusing. There are modified versions of that scale, of this ratings of perceived exertion scale, that just go from 1 to 10 or 1 to 15. We have one actually up behind the treadmills on the glass facing towards I-95 inside of our lab. So you can see that, and that's a way, like, hey, if you're, if I want you working at a moderate to, a vigorous pace, I want you to be working not at an all-out, 100% of your effort, maybe it's 70 to 80% of your effort, or 7 out of 10. That's something that someone can maybe approximate in their mind and work with, and then they know how hard they're supposed to work. Another one is the talk test method. And this one, they've actually done some scientific studies which are really cool that show that it can be as effective as anything else, especially if you want to work at the aerobic threshold, which means like working so that you can work long enough aerobically that you get into the Krebs cycle and you're burning all this energy, and then you're creating tons of ATP so you can just run and run and run. If you go too fast, though, you'll have that buildup, and then you'll start to shut down and hit the wall and run out of energy. But the talk test method is good because it's basically based on the concept that if while you're exercising, if you can still talk, and you should be breathing, frequently enough to supply your lungs and blood with the oxygen it needs to pump, but it's about fluency. So if you're being able to run and I don't know why I'm sitting here in this chair doing this little run pump action, but like being able to say the Pledge of Allegiance without having to go, I pledge allegiance to the flag, that's something that fails the talk test. But if someone is running, they're able to go, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands. You see how I'm able to I'm still breathing to supply, this activity that I'm really not doing because I'm sitting in this chair, but I'm breathing enough to supply enough oxygen for this activity because I'm not working too hard, but I'm still able to fluently talk. And you can use the Pledge of Allegiance, you can use the ABCs, you could just have a conversation. I've had a lot of really nice long runs slow run where I've gone with a buddy and we'll talk, and a nice conversation. We're working hard, we're working long. In fact, I work better that way than I ever did with trying to concentrate on any of these other methods of intensity. So there is something to it. It's very simplified. and it's something you can work with. If they start working to the point where they're breathing too heavily and they can't have simple conversation, then that's, going past the aerobic threshold. That's working a little bit harder than they need to be. They should back it down if they're going to be working aerobically. So here you see it. That's just what we were talking about. It tells you how to do it. And then the way they define that talk test, the ability to speak during activity, that can help to talk about that ventilatory threshold. So that's kind of tells you the difference between when you're working aerobically versus anaerobically, when that intensity gets too high. There's some general guidelines for very light, moderate, hard, very hard, and maximal. My head is in the way of that last one there, but that's a 20 on the RPE scale. So there you see when we say, oh, okay, like a moderate is a 12 to 13 on the RPE scale. Again, I personally don't like it, but you do need to know it. It comes up in so many classes. I wish they would just switch to a 1 to 10 or a 1 to 15, because when you're already teaching your clients so much new stuff, and then you have to teach them what a 6 means and what a 9 means out of 20, like, that's too much, I think, for someone. A 1 to 10, a modified scale, is a good way to go. And really, look, when you do the training, it's up to you. You can come up with your own scale, just 1 to 10. Why not? If you use it every time and you can help people identify it, that's just fine. But Borg created the 6 to 20 scale. It comes up. You'll be asked about it, so now you know what it is. There you have it, the Borg scale in all of its glory. So some training modalities for zone 1, zone 2, and zone 3. Remember we had the zones about what's appropriate for people based on the assessments that you do. There's stage training, so 3-stage programming. I'm going to open my book because my head's in the way of me actually seeing what I'm looking at here. There we go. So those different heart rate training zones, again, you can get specific if you have a heart rate monitor, which you can get for as little as about $50. The one I have, it's a really stripped down model, but it's a good brand from Polar. I got it for $50. And it really wasn't too bad. And I'm glad that I have it, because then when I do my training, I can get a little bit more specific in what I want to do. But if you don't have it, you can use RPEs and some sample the things that they talk about. Walking or jogging, especially at a increased rate, those can be sample activities for zone 1. Group exercise classes or spinning can be zone 2. I mean, my spinning classes were probably mostly zone 2, getting into that 76 to 85% heart rate range, but there were portions of it, because I did mostly interval type classes where we were going all out. Like your heart rate had to be getting very close to maxed out. And that's more zone 3, things like sprinting, or again, a very vigorous intensity HIIT training class or spinning class, something like that. So there you see some of the pictures I'm looking at. They're talking about the lactate threshold, peak intervals, like when things happen. So again, target heart rate for stage 1, 65 to 75, 12 to 13 at heart rate max, or 12 to 13 for the RPE. In fact, I'm not going to read those to you. You guys just make sure you know that you know them, because they're here and they're going to be on these quizzes. For an intermediate client who has a good base, that's stage 2. They can work in that 65 to 85. We're increasing the workload, kind of like what we would do with strength training, speed or incline. Like you don't have to change the speed. If you change the incline of the treadmill, now they're working harder. Again, better capacity, all that good stuff. Alternate days of the week between this and stage 1. So like if you're having someone do this, like do one day where it's more vigorous, do one day where it's more moderate. Balance, balance, balance. So this way they don't overtrain and overwork themselves. And I just skipped that whole slide. It doesn't let me go back. So let's go here. Stage 3, that is for someone that's very advanced. More increases for the workload. Alter those heart rates in and out of all 3 zones. And again, you're not going to be going all out stage 3 style training every single day. You'll have long, slow days. You'll have days where it's high intensity. You got to change it up back and forth. What you'll do, though, ultimately is increase the capacity of your energy systems needed at the power level of the OPT model. And when you're doing power exercises, even though you work with like a maximal strength exercise right into a power, it's at like 30 to 40% of your 1 rep max in order to like do that. That's going to tax your cardiorespiratory system as well. So getting your cardio up, especially in stage 3, that's going to make you a much more successful power athlete. Here they go. 5 to 10 minute warm up. Increase the workload every 60 seconds until you reach zone 3. This will require a slow climb through zone 2 for at least 2 minutes. So just little bit increments, incremental climb. After pushing for another minute in zone 3, decrease the workload to zone 2 for a minute. If the heart rate does drop to a normal rate, overload the body again. Go to zone 3 for a minute. After this minute, go back to zone 1 for 5 to 10 minutes before starting over. So you see how they're kind of cycling through the different zones? I mean, this is good interval style training in stage 3. And remember, at like 85, 95% of your heart rate max, you're not going to be able to work that way for too long. So this is going to really overtax you, but then keep you working so that you can have these adaptations that you're looking for. And repeat. So stage training here, simply increasing the intensity for the same type of training is not going to give you the consistent increases in fitness levels, weight control, because the body's going to get used to what you're doing. So just putting a little more intensity, you're not shocking the body anymore, and it's going to get wise to what you're doing, and it's going to maintain and probably not continue to benefit the way you want. If you go through that intensity, through the 3 heart rate zones in stage 3, your client can take greater advantage of EPOC, right? Like that excessive post-exercise oxygen consumption, and that is also going to help achieve greater results, especially people that are looking to develop, or just have more fat loss. This is the way to do it. Now, training. This can be just as effective as doing just your more traditional cardio types. So that's an interesting way to go. Sorry, I skipped over that slide there. But circuit training allows for comparable fitness results without spending extended periods of time to achieve them. A lot of people don't want to work on a treadmill or an elliptical for 30 minutes, 45 minutes. So what can they do instead? So this is a time-efficient manner in which to train a client, and that'll be thoroughly described as it pertains to cardiorespiratory training. So what you do typically, circuit training programs consist of a series of strength training exercises that an individual performs one after the other with minimal rest. So you just go from one station to the next. That's a circuit. This is the table with the examples right here. So you could do things like in the stabilization level, you do a ball dumbbell chest press, ball dumbbell row, single leg scaption, single leg dumbbell curls, ball dumbbell tricep extension, step up to balance, and then rest. So that's one cycle of the circuit, and then you go through again. Again, just as beneficial, but more time efficient. So, I mean, some people like the idea of running a long time. I do. Not everybody does. Working in some circuit training sessions can be very, very beneficial too. Better EPOC, so that's good, better energy expenditure, and it does give you some strength benefits as well. So if you're someone like me that doesn't have a lot of time, that's why even when I was able to squeeze some workouts in the last few months, I will more often than not do a high intensity circuit versus going out and just running, because I'm able to do all of these things that we're talking about at once. Nearly identical caloric expenditure for the same given time span when compared with walking at a fast pace. So there you have it. So they've got some sample programs here. I'll let you kind of go through the book and look to see how this, how this fits for you. But you see 5 to 10 minutes for flexibility, 5 to 10 minutes stage 1 cardio training, and then circuit weight training, 15 to 20, etc., so on. So someone at the strength level, there's what theirs looks like. And it tells you, all right, 5 to 10 minutes. Check out how this works. So this is breaking down a full hour session for you. 5 to 10 minutes spent in warm-up. right? Do a little flexibility, self-myofascial release, some active iso stretches, all those things you're going to be practicing. Then, if they're in strength level, you can put them into some stage 2 cardio for 5 to 10 minutes. Put them in a circuit weight training for 15 to 20 minutes. Do a little more cardio, and then cool them down. And guess what, folks? That's your money. That's your hour. And you just did a whole bunch of stuff with someone, and they got a lot of benefits and a lot of different components of fitness. And then here you see it with your advanced client in the power level. Like they're going to get a little bit of cardio training as well. It might not be their biggest focus, but it's there, and you could work it into a program and have it work for them so that they benefit all around like they want to. So that's it, everybody. Cardio is good. You can do it separate outside of this, but we also looked in those last few slides as to how you can incorporate it in along with everything else that you're doing. So it's not just about doing all the strength training exercises. It's like, hey, where does cardio fit? You actually can have that 5 to 10 minutes 2 times in a given workout that can actually benefit your client, and they get a little bit of everything. But don't forget, you can give them homework so they do their minimums according to like just health standards. 150 minutes or 75 minutes a week is what you're looking for. Another thing here though, because movement's involved, make sure that you do all the corrective stuff and look at those kinetic chain checkpoints, because if they don't have the right posture, and then you go through cardio, which usually consists of a lot of repetitive movement patterns, that's one of those things that can ultimately lead to injury. Thank you all for watching. Appreciate it. Hopefully this was as effective for you as being in the classroom with me. Maybe my face in the corner of this is more helpful since that's the first time I've been able to record that way. So have a good weekend, everyone. If you watch it sooner, if not, you're watching Monday. Make sure you're ready for your clients. You will have a quiz on this chapter. I've talked about pretty much everything you need to know, but make sure you memorize those variables. You see where they go, RPEs, all that kind of stuff. Have a good one, everybody. Thanks again.